The opinions and viewpoints expressed in .NET Rocks are not necessarily those of its sponsors, or of Microsoft Corporation, its partners, or employees. .NET Rocks is a production of Franklin's Net, which is solely responsible for its content. Franklin's Net, training developers to work smarter. Hey, Rockheads! Stop all cat shaving activities and listen up. It's time for another stellar episode of .NET Rocks, the internet audio talk show for .NET developers with Carl Franklin and Rory Blythe. This is Jeff Macielik, here to announce show number 98 with guest Mark Dunn, recorded live Friday, January 28th, 2005. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net, training developers to work smarter, and now offering hands-on VBNet, ASP.NET, and C# classes. Online at www.franklins.net. And by Telerik RAD Controls, the UI essentials for rapid ASP.NET development. Online at www.telerik.com. Support is also provided by Code Magazine, the leading independent magazine for .NET developers. Online at www.code-magazine.com. And now, the man who's jacked up higher than a prom dress in June, Carl Franklin.
Yeah. I can't take credibility for that line. That was actually the line of my former co-host and guest tonight on .NET Rocks, Mark Dunn. And, you know, I usually introduce Rory and we have some banter, you know, for a couple of minutes, and then we introduce the guest, but I feel like it's like old home week here. So, Mark, how are you?
Hey, man, I'm doing great.
And Rory, you're out there. You're out there.
I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine, too.
Cool. You're like the jealous girlfriend persona tonight.
Yeah. Thanks for asking Mark first how he was and not asking me.
Well, of course, you know.
I'm fine, too, you know.
Because Mark and I are buds, and you are, and I are not, right?
It's fine. I don't want to be a part of your little .NET Rocks club. That's fine.
Yeah.
At least, you know, Don Box probably won't accuse you and Rory of being, you know, partners.
True. Anyway, I did get a few emails I'd like to get out of the way. One came from a guy named Gerardo, and he said, "Hi, Carl. I listened to the show on a random night. Back in September or October of last year, I was going to listen to all of the shows sequentially from the start. There was probably about 100 hours worth of sound bites already on MSDN. I figured I'd have to listen to one show every single night, including weekends, and scare off the women for a little over 3 months. So it didn't take me very long to start picking the topics I'm interested in and listening to them in any order. What's special about Monday nights? Is there any chance you could make a CD with the tunes you play on the air? I like the jamming, freaky, funkadelic stuff. I can't remember which shows right away, but some of the stuff would be great to listen to while in Code Nirvana." Gerardo. That's not a bad idea. Rory, we should do that. We should put out a, .NET Rocks music CD. That'd be kind of fun to throw around at events and stuff. That'd be kind of cool.
I'm down with that. You sure you don't want to ask Mark if he wants to do it with you?
Unfortunately, Mark has no musical capabilities whatsoever.
Carl doesn't care.
I appreciate listening to music. I can't make...
Carl's not into you for your music, Mark. That's fine.
Hey, there's this other one that I got, and I'd like to know what you guys think of this.
Is it addressed to Mark?
No.
Okay, that's
actually,
fine.
I'm going to paraphrase because it was rather wise ass. But as you remember when we were talking about office development, I think I gave people the wrong impression. I gave people the impression that I had tried office programming, like I needed to do it, and it was just too hard for me to figure out, and so I gave up. And that's not at all what happened. What happened was I never had a chance to actually do it. Like, nobody ever said to me, "Hey, I need an Office application, write it." So I never did VBA, and the time that I did mess around with it was a long time ago. And, it was one of those things where I looked at the object model and I said, maybe later. So that is the reality. I'm not, somebody who couldn't figure it out and, had to write an Office application. So I'm really not in the best particular place to say the object model is difficult to learn or it's not. That was just my opinion, and it probably doesn't mean very much. So take that as it is. So anyway, Rory, how are you? It's been hours
fine.
since we talked.
Yep. Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm good. Mm-hmm.
What have you been doing today?
Oh, nothing. Meetings. Went out and took Jim Blizzard, the local district evangelist, out to drop his car off at a little local body shop, and then I came back, and that's all. If I sound surprised, it's been a while since you've asked me how my day went. You just haven't been caring lately. It's like there's somebody else who's got your attention, and I just but everything's fine. I mean, if you really care.
Of course I care. I can't. You have no idea how much I care, man.
Oh, well. I'm sorry. Could you hang on real quick? I have a phone call here. Hello? Well, whoever it was hung up. Could we just get on with the show so we can go see the counselor after this and everything?
Okay. How's Adika?
Oh, Adika's fine. She's doing really well. How's Mark?
I don't know. Why don't you ask him, man?
Hey, Mark's doing great.
Good.
All right, come on. Let's get on with the show. We've beaten this joke to death. So Mark, what have you been doing? It's been a long time since you've been on this show. I guess, the last time was sort of a round table. We had a bunch of people on, and you didn't really get to talk very much, but man, it's been so long. What have you been doing all this time?
Well, we've been doing a lot of training with my company, and we delved into to doing consulting work. And I've always said we were reluctant consultants because I've tried to brand as a training company. And, this last year we actually generated more revenue from consulting projects than we did training.
Wow.
We just recently got our partnership with Microsoft as a partner under e-business solutions.
Uh-huh.
So we've been doing some BizTalk, SharePoint stuff. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's great. And the technologies that you've been personally digging into?
Well, of course, from the .NET side, ADO.NET is of great interest to me. I'm kind of a SQL geek and a programmer, and nothing ties those two things together better than ADO.NET. And, of course, I've been a long-time fan of BizTalk, which is the other topic we're going to be talking about tonight.
Yeah. Awesome. So ADONet 2.0 is really what you've been looking at. What's so cool about ADONet 2.0?
Oh man, there are so many cool features in it. It's tough to know where to start and kind of get through them in a half hour. But I guess the major stuff to look at would be Mars, the new support for data tables. You can serialize those in binary format.
Oh, cool.
You can work with them independent of data sets, which is something we've really needed for a long time.
Right.
If you're dealing with web services or remoting and you want to work strictly with a table, performance improvements under the hood for ADO.NET are significant. You really, to see it helps to kind of write some benchmarks. You'd just be amazed at how much faster things are. Other things are like provider factories. I don't know if you've ever tried to write
a provider?
Sort of an independent data layer.
No, I haven't.
You had those IDB interfaces that existed in the earlier version of ADO.NET. So you could kind of take an interface-based approach to trying to make an independent data layer.
Okay.
But really that was kind of nasty. Well, you now have this thing called Provider Factory that allows you to sort of create a pluggable data layer if you want to. There are also new XML features that are available that work with SQL Server 2005. Very, very cool stuff there. Query notifications, we need to talk about that a little bit tonight. And probably my new favorite thing is SQL bulk copy. So you don't hear a lot of people talking about that. I actually got into this because Julie Lerman blogged about some tests she was doing with it.
Yeah.
And I was so astounded at the numbers she put down. I had to, go write some code examples and see what it did.
Wow.
So we'll have to talk about that some tonight. It's just
let's go through the list. So Mars, the what is it? Multiple result set, asynchronous result set. What is it?
Right. Mars stands for multiple active result sets, and the basic idea with Mars is that you can have one connection now, and you could have multiple data readers acting off independent command objects.
Okay.
That work off that single connection. Now, if you tried to do that today with the current version of ADO.NET, the data reader would certainly pose a problem for you there.
Yeah.
You wind up having to close the connection and reopen it if you want to, or open another connection if you want to deal with another data reader.
So this is only still data reader, so it's forward only, read only.
Right. You can work this with data readers that each have, it's important that the data readers have a separate command object that, of course, they're operating off of. And this is something, too, if you read some of the different blogs out there about Mars.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of research on it when I was trying to get my head wrapped around how this really works. A lot of guys are saying, you've got to be careful not to misuse this. It's not something you would really look at if you were going to look for a performance boost in the way things work.
So what's the immediate benefit, just having to...
Well, I guess one of the immediate benefits is it would allow you to write some cleaner-looking code. If you had a need to pull, multiple data readers and you didn't want to reopen other connections, it would simplify your code somewhat. But I really wouldn't do it for that reason. If you start to think about it, connection pooling is out there, and it's your friend when you need to do something like that. That's very efficient for reusing connections. Probably the thing that I would most look at Mars for would be some transactional support. Let's say that I wanted to open a data reader and process rows, and inside the loop I wanted to also do some inserts, updates, and deletes on the same database.
Oh, okay, sure.
So if I want to do something like that, I could use Mars and keep everything in the same transaction scope.
Right, and you couldn't do that today. If you have a data reader open, you have to close that data reader before you can do anything else.
Right, or you wind up opening a second connection, which puts it in a different transaction scope. So it makes it, kind of a nasty thing if you're trying to deal with transactions.
I see.
That probably would be the biggest thing I would look at.
So you wouldn't necessarily use these with like asynchronous calls to fill multiple tables or multiple collections of data objects.
Well, no,
you
could.
That?
I mean, if you had some web page maybe that you were populating multiple grids on, and you wanted to create multiple readers to do that and run them asynchronously, if one were going to run much longer than, say, another one.
Sure.
As long as these guys are all running on different threads, then, the quickest one to be finished and get its results back, you could go ahead and process that grid and wait on the other ones and just catch it with an event.
That's cool.
So some other things about Mars, basically Mars is a SQL Server 2005 thing that works with the SQL client. But, the Oracle client also supports the ability to pull back multiple result sets.
I was going to ask you, it is a SQL-only thing, but it isn't. But this is something that has been lacking in SQL Server, that other as you said, Oracle.
Right, yeah. It is something that's been lacking in SQL Server that you've now got, kind of built into 2005 to support asynchronous results coming back. Oracle's had it. I haven't played around with this, but I was reading recently on someone's blog, and I need to get you some links. I'll provide some links after the show to a bunch of resources I have for ADO.NET 2.0 that I think, listeners would probably want to read and do some follow-up on it. But amazingly, too, let me mention this. Okay. A lot of the development team out at Microsoft, they blog about this. So man, I mean, you can talk about getting it directly from the horse's mouth.
Yeah.
You're able to read some of these developers' blogs, and it's just incredible the amount of information that's out there.
So Mars is obviously something you're going to use with data sets and data tables and data readers, maybe. Maybe not. Is there a connection with the data adapter with Mars?
Well, I don't really know if I would say there's a particular connection with the data adapter with it.
Okay.
I mean, what I've been playing around with it so far, I've just used data readers and commands with it.
Okay.
But it's kind of a big topic, I think. I haven't looked into it as deeply as I've wanted to so far.
Well, I know that the data adapter uses the data reader under the hood to populate itself, but I'm not so sure that, I mean, unless you use the data adapter asynchronously, and they were both using the same connection, I don't know. Well, anyway, what about, you said performance in ADONet 2.0. Now, I know Rory's not a data set guy at all, and, he's really interested in, calling store procedures manually and this kind of stuff. Are those guys, are you going to see a lot of performance enhancements just in that fundamental act?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that you would see immediately for performance with the data set, and particularly with the data table, is just the indexing engine for the data table has been completely rewritten. So whenever you're doing inserts, updates, deletes, all of that's going to be much faster now with the data table. It would effectively result in faster fill and merge operations whenever you're working with data sets. So that's pretty impressive enhancement just in itself. I mean, just to give you an example, I'm trying to think about something I wrote a while back. I was inserting about 100,000 rows into a table as a test with ADO 1.1, which that took about 3 minutes. And I created a unique constraint on one of the columns that I defined for the data table itself. I went ahead and took that test, pulled it into ADO 2.0, and the same operation that took 3 minutes with the old version took about 4 seconds with the new one. So that's fairly significant.
3 minutes to 4 seconds.
3 minutes to 4 seconds for 100,000 rows.
Well said.
Well, it was something to think about. The first thing that I was thinking about when I heard that was I was wondering if maybe there would be some other operations that used to take 3 seconds and now take 4 minutes or whatever it was, whatever the.
Well, now to look at my test, I'm not really connecting it to a database. I was simply creating a data table and then writing a loop that wound up sticking 100,000 rows of kludged up data that I created into it. Okay. So we didn't have the overhead of me communicating back to a back-end database with that.
But your code was essentially the same architecturally, right?
Yeah, absolutely the same.
That is very interesting.
Along those lines, is ADO.NET 2 going to be totally backwards compatible?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you take your other code and pull it in there, it should run fine. I say should because I haven't migrated everything I've written over to it yet. But the team didn't want to make you have to rewrite all of your ADO code whenever you upgrade to the next version of the
Right. Yeah, earlier I thought you said that you were talking about the IDB interfaces, and it sounded almost as though you had implied that they had been dropped, but I guess as long as they're still there, then...
Right, yeah, if you're using IDB, the interfaces, shouldn't be a problem, but I think you would probably want to look at the DB factory if you're trying to write some kind of pluggable data layer of some sort.
Now, yeah, I've been messing with the provider model in there a bit, and it really is pretty fantastic. So that stuff is great. Definitely is an improvement over the previous universe. But anyway, go on, Carl. You had a question?
Well, no, I was just going to ask him about the update method of the data adapter. Because, to me, that method right there sort of represents the biggest black box in .NET and ADO.NET. You just say update, you cross your fingers, and then magic happens.
Right.
And
If you have optimistic concurrency, it's often black dark magic that happens.
Yeah. So let's go through the process of what happens when you do an update, and then maybe about some enhancements that have been made in ADONet 2.0.
Right. Well, one that I just came across, and in fact, let me give a shout out to this guy named Bill Ryan up in Greenville, South Carolina. I guess it was a week or so back. I had some time off and was just looking around at what the user group talks, were in the area, and saw that somebody was doing an ADONet 2.0 user group talk up in Greenville. So me and some guys from my company, took off on a road trip and decided that we would drive up there and just, kind of sit in and listen. And this guy did just an absolutely fantastic talk. And something that he brought up that I hadn't really looked at was this property called accept changes during update that you have whenever you do updates.
And that's in 1.1 now.
Let me think. I didn't think it was in 1.1.
It is.
Is it in 1.1?
Yeah.
Well, it may be the behavior that he was talking about is different on this one.
Okay.
But anyway, he was saying it would stop adapters from calling accept changes on each row as it updates them.
Oh, okay.
So you could control that. So that might be nice for dealing with some transactional code that you're writing.
It seems like there's a lot of those properties that because update is such a high level thing. There's a lot of flags in there you know what it is? Accept changes on fill, I think is the one that's in there. Accept changes during update, maybe. I'm sorry. I can look that up real quick. But, when you do an update, essentially what's happening there, just to give the listeners a little background, is that the data adapter is getting all of the rows that have changes, and it's iterating through those rows and, saying, what is this row? Is this an added row? Looking at the row state of that row. Is this an added row? Then I'm going to call the insert command. And if it's a deleted row, I'll call the delete command, etc., update command, whatever, and plug in the parameters. And then it says, as you said, Mark, it calls accept changes on the row if there was no problem. And if there is a problem, by default, this is what I always found weird, and I guess it works well for ASP.NET, where you're sort of stateless, but in a stateful situation, it's not so great. It just exits. It throws an exception. If the SQL server throws a SQL exception, it just stops what it's doing, and some of the changes may have gone through, and it'll just abort. So there's one of these Boolean properties that says continue update on error, right? And you set that to true, and it'll just go on to the next change. So it looks like this, when you're talking about here, just to reiterate, accept changes during update.
Exactly, and I mean, just what you were talking about is the perfect intro to what if I had something that was transactional that I wanted to deal with.
Yeah,
so
right.
If I've got it in the scope of a transaction, then accept changes has been called on all those rows that have gone through up to the point that I hit some sort of an error. So even though I might be able to roll changes back in the data set, how am I going to to fix that, or in the database, how am I going to fix that and sync it up with the data set that I have?
Yeah.
So if you have this setup that we were just talking about, you can prevent it from calling accept changes on each of those rows.
Yeah.
And then
That's
if
cool.
your transaction commits peacefully and everything is all copacetic, then you could go through and sync it and call accept changes yourself.
Right. And what we have to do now is actually open the connection, begin a transaction, get a transaction object, and set that transaction object reference into the transaction properties that your insert, update, delete commands. And then you can do a rollback or a commit. So I guess this means you don't have to do all that code?
Yeah, you're not going to have to write all the nasty code that you used to have to write in the past. It's a much simpler pattern to follow. And actually a guy that has written a lot about this, I can't think of his last name. His first name is Angel, and he's on the ADO.NET team. I'll give you a link to his blog, though. But he started back, I guess, in July of last year, writing, once a week or so about different features in ADO.net.
Cool.
And, he's just got a wonderful resource for information about late-breaking changes that are coming out, in the next community build, that kind of thing.
Awesome. And by the way, I did confirm that. I was wrong there. Accept changes during fill is the one that's in there now in 1.1. Accept changes during update is new. I'm sorry about that. Sorry.
Right, and somebody on IRC's already, if you guys are on IRC,
oh, yes.
Got the blog.
Weblogs.asp.net/AngelSB.
Right.
Cool.
Right. Excellent blog if you guys want to take a look at it. And, you can put a link up to it. I'm sure he'd appreciate more traffic.
You bet. Serializing data tables. Serializing data sets has always been a sort of a weird thing. It was, I think when we were both interviewing Dino Esposito, the barbecue king.
Yes.
Yep.
He loves Southern barbecue. If you ever have a chance to take Dino Esposito out to eat, make certain you take him out and get some Southern barbecue.
Right, he loves barbecue. Well, anyway, he was the guy who told us that the data set, sort of the binary formatter, has this fork in it that says if I'm going to serialize a data set, particularly, it says if the object is a data set, serialize it as XML. Otherwise, use the standard binary serializer. And it doesn't work with data tables. Doesn't work with data rows.
Yeah,
so
and you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, that's the problem with the current version of it, because it even if you're using a binary formatter, if you're dealing with a data set, it's going to serialize it as XML no matter what.
Right.
Right. So now they fixed that. So in the new version of it, you have the ability to use the binary formatter with it.
That's great.
There's a new property called remoting format that hangs off both a data set and a data table. So you can set, what serialization format you want to use. It can either be binary, the default is XML. So if you leave it at the default, you still get exactly the same behavior with ADO 2.0 as you've got with, the 1.x.
That's awesome.
Versions of it right now. But if you go in and change the remoting property to, serialization format.binary, then you're off to the races, and you're able to, write a pretty simple test. And again, a benchmark here says more than I can, laud it for its abilities. If you're out there playing with this, go ahead and write yourself a little example and just see what it does. So this is something else I was recently playing around with. I had, about 500,000 rows that I'd stored in a data set and decided to use, both the binary and the XML formats to write it out to a file. So 500,000 rows, I tested it, with XML. And the file size of it was about, I want to say, roughly 400 or 500K. So then I turned around and set this to binary and went ahead and serialized it out, and it was about 80K.
Wow.
So what a difference, right? And that's just writing it out to a file. Imagine now if you're writing code where you serialize this through web service or through remoting. Imagine what you're cutting down to pass over the network.
Mark, we had a question from the chat room from Gary DeRocha, and he says, can store procedures in SQL Server take arrays as input now?
I don't actually know. I haven't played around with some of the new stored procedure goodies that are in SQL Server 2005.
But you can do a sort of a similar thing, which is this thing you were talking about, the SQL bulk copy. What's that all about?
All right, yeah, bulk copy is just a fabulous feature that's now available. So why would I want to do a bulk copy? I need to quickly transfer some data from one table to another. It could be on the same server. It could be on a different server, right? So I wouldn't want to have to write a lot of code to do that. Normally, I'd probably today go out to something like DTS and use DTS to move it if I needed to. So SQL bulk copy is an object that is there if you need to solve that sort of a problem. I want to just quickly suck a bunch of rows out of one table and put them into another one. Again, we've got to look at some benchmarks on this, and shout out to Julie Lorman for kind of cluing me in about this. I wouldn't have looked at it probably for a long time otherwise. So I read a little blog entry that she made, and I started running some tests with it. So how would you normally programmatically wind up copying data from one table to another? You might wind up opening a data reader, you pull them all out, and through a command object, you do inserts into a new table, right? So, yeah, you're going to process
I'm
one row
thinking
at a
I'd
time.
do backup table, I'd probably try to take a high-level approach if I could.
Right. Well, that would be a worst-case scenario.
Right.
And I'm certain there's probably, a programmer somewhere in the world that has actually done this at some point. I could think back to a time when I might have approached the problem that way rather than using something like DTS.
Well, if you could do it with a simple thing, but, chances are you're not going to be able to, so...
So if you want to use SQL bulk copy to pull this off, it's pretty easy to do. All you got to do is open a connection, get a command object, and set up a data reader for it. All right. Then next, you want to create a SQL bulk copy object. You set the destination information in the SQL bulk copy object you've got. It's got a method called write to server that you would pass a data reader to as a reference.
Cool.
And boom, you're done. And once you do this, you really have to put a clock on this just to see, or maybe you don't. Like some of the tests that I did before, I would run a test with anywhere from 500 to 2,000 rows using the method I just described to you earlier. And actually, I was improving on the method of doing the row processing because I was using the batch update facilities that are available now with SQL 2005.
Right.
You can set a batch size for your rows to go over the network, which is really cool too.
Yeah.
So it would have been faster. The bad test that I wrote would have been faster with the new version than with the old version. It would have been much worse. So at any rate, it was taking anywhere from like 30 minutes up to close to an hour. To process, 50,000 to 200,000 rows, across this thing.
Huh.
So I started playing around with the SQL bulk copy object because I saw Julie's numbers and was just astounded by them, and it actually proved out. What was taking, 30 minutes to an hour suddenly took, between 10 seconds and a minute.
Okay, now this is the second outrageous number you've laid on us here, man. I want the truth. You're not just pulling the wool over our eyes, are you, man?
No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do it. That's why I'm encouraging.
Did you call up Kimberly Tripp and say, Kimberly, come on over here and tune my server before I run this bulk copy thing? Were you doing that?
No, not at all.
What's it actually doing underneath? What accounts for the change? What's going on?
I have no clue what this does under the hood, and I haven't. I've actually been curious about that. I haven't been able to find information yet that talks about internally what exactly SQL bulk copy.
All you need is a 6-pack of beer and reflector, man.
Yeah.
Or a bottle of
Or
scotch.
a 12-pack and Iodasm.
But, the really amazing thing about this, though, is these numbers that we're getting from SQL bulk copy are very, very close to what you would get by natively running DTS to move the data.
Yeah. Wow.
They're not very far off.
Jeez. And what was the first benchmark you told us about 15 minutes ago or so?
I don't know.
It was
about like 3 or 4 different.
It was like
benchmarks.
3 seconds compared to 3 minutes or something like that. And it was shit. Hang on.
Oh, we were probably talking about loading a data table.
Data table, yeah. So you were stuffing data into a data table and then doing an update. Is that what you were doing?
No, they were just inserts.
Inserts.
Now, the idea there, if you want to run this benchmark, try to set it up for yourself. Create a data table, and this is programmatic. I'm not connecting it, to a back-end database.
Right.
Go ahead and set this up, just to be a data table in memory.
Okay.
And go through a loop and insert, 50 or 100,000 rows of data into it.
All right. Okay.
And then, to really get advantage of the new indexing engine in it, you can, set a unique constraint on one of the columns, and then turn around and try to do this in ADO.NET 2.0.
Same code?
Same code, exactly the same code.
Jeez. Wow. That's incredible.
It is. I mean, and that's why I just want to encourage listeners. I mean, if you get the community build, write some code with this. Sit down and just start playing with it. It'll be your new hobby. Instead of playing Halo, you'll be out, writing ADO code till the late hours of the morning. Which, speaking of that, I'd never played Halo until this Christmas. I got Halo for my son and just got totally addicted to it for like a week and a half.
So your son didn't get to play?
Well, we actually were both playing with it, but man, what a great game.
It is. Have you seen Halo 2?
Not yet. I've heard good things about it, but I haven't seen it. We don't have an Xbox of all things. We wind up playing PC games all the time.
Okay.
Here in the Dunn house.
Jeez. Yeah, I don't know what Rory thinks about games, but I realize the potential for addiction, and so I sort of stay away.
Yeah, I think I sent you a link a while back to a game called Snood that I kind of gotten addicted to.
Oh, yeah.
And really, most of the games I play are not first-person shooter-type games. I play simple 2D sort of puzzle games,
I'm with you. I like Pac-Man, mindless stuff, because, you write code all the time. Last thing you want to do is, immerse yourself in some, complicated thing where you're going to have to bite the dust for like 10 hours before you can score one whatever.
Unlike coding.
Maybe it's a southern thing, but I enjoy checkers of all things. I do. I don't like playing chess, but I really enjoy playing checkers. And, if you've got MSN Games or whatever, it's real easy to get on there and find an opponent somewhere in the world that's fairly anonymous. And just,
I could see you as an old man on the porch in Atlanta sipping a mint julep and playing checkers with your grandson, with a sort of like a sweater on, and a hat.
Yeah, come down to Cracker Barrel here sometime, and you'll see me doing that anyway. They don't have mint juleps at Cracker Barrel, but they've got checkerboards. So, cool. Cracker Barrel's a restaurant. I don't know if they're up in the Northeast or not.
Yep, we do have them up here. Yeah. Cool.
So I don't know how we got into playing checkers from talking about ADO Net 2.0, but...
So some of the new XML features in ADO Net 2.0, what comes into play here?
Okay, what comes into play here, one thing that I've been looking at recently is there's a new data type for XML supported in SQL Server 2005. So it makes it pretty easy for you to take native XML and just stuff it right into the database and pull it right back out. So that's one thing that's probably pretty cool. If we wanted to look at some internals, inside the data set itself, one thing that you're able to do now, a data set or a data table can now handle multiple inline schemas. So if you wanted to have more than one schema associated with the data table, you're able to do that. The data set fully supports namespaces now. So that would be interesting if you've got a data set that you wanted to have contain multiple data tables that you serialize out to XML. With the same name, but you wanted different namespaces to be able to get to those individual data table or the data associated with them. You're able to do stuff like that.
I was going to say, Rory, is any of this sounding interesting to you?
I think when it came to database programming, I was always I was never quite the ADO.NET guy that I would say Mark is. Mark you sound like quite the ADO.NET aficionado, whereas I was sort of a casual ADO.NET user. I might put it focusing more on ASP.NET and stuff like that.
I'm certainly a SQL ADO geek, though. I love this stuff. I get excited about it. Whenever I teach, classes on ADO.NET, I'm just bouncing all over the room, and not everyone gets so excited about data.
Yeah, no, I do dig it though, just because I'm not so much an ADO.NET person. Hearing all of this stuff is actually really helpful because I'm less likely to go and seek this information out on my own. And so if it comes to me in this format, then that's actually great. And learning, that I can format, data sets with a binary formatter to make it easier, to push them across the wire has just done nothing but bring joy to my heart. So
yeah, I gotta second Rory's comments there. In general, doing this show I've just learned so much from talking to all these incredibly brilliant people. It's just amazing the stuff that I've picked up here in these conversations, and I'm sure the listeners feel the same way. But it's always It's always great to learn these little nuggets that you wouldn't necessarily find on your own.
Yeah, I mean, back when I was co-hosting the show, man, that was one of the highlights of doing it. Was just being able to talk to people like Scott Guthrie or Ingo Rammer about remoting. And,
yeah,
big payoff there, huh?
Yeah, and now with podcasting, anyone can do that. Those of you who are doing web forms development should definitely check out Telerik RAD, R-A-D, Control Suite, the UI essentials for rapid ASP.NET development, online at www.telerik.com, Telerik.com. They're a new sponsor, and we've taken their tools for a test drive here, and we like what we see. This indispensable collection of components cover the major aspects of most web applications, from the CMS backbone and the WYSIWYG editor to navigation, content rotation, and charting. Telerik has just released version Q1 2005 of the RAD Control Suite, which features new major versions of their tree view, panel bar, and charting components. The company has been prominent for frequent releases, so you can expect something new every month. RAD Controls is not merely a collection of ordinary controls, but rather a value set of products, many of which are market leaders in their respective categories. They've received a number of industry awards and recognitions. Moreover, as of June 2004, a modified version of their flagship control, the HTML content editor called RAD Editor, has been made available by Microsoft as a replacement of the default HTML placeholder in Microsoft Content Management Server 2002. All the individual controls can also be purchased separately. If you only need navigation components, for example, you can opt in for the subset called RAD Navigation Suite. A subscription option is also available, which entitles you to new products and free updates for 1 year. So you should definitely check them out. Telerik RAD Control Suite Q1 2005 for ASP.NET at www.telerik.com. So getting back to the XML query notifications, let's talk about those.
Oh, yeah. Query notifications are very cool. So this is something supported really by SQL Server 2005. Its service broker architecture comes into play, which is something I've really just started to try to dig into to understand everything about how the service broker works. I'll give you a link to a blog. Or it's not a blog, actually. There are a bunch of MSDN articles that a guy named Christian Kleinerman has written that are really, really good about things like query notification.
Okay.
And Bob, I can't think of his last name. He's a developmentor instructor. Not instructor, but instructor. Boschman, is that right?
What is it?
Bob
Boschman.
Oh, Boschman?
Boschman. Yeah, I guess that was it. Bob Boschman. He's written a really excellent article about the way query notification works. So he gets into how it ties into the service broker architecture.
Cool.
But, basically you've got a lot of things that come together to make it work. The SQL query engine, the service broker comes into play, the, notification request and dependency classes that are available in the framework as well. And this is sort of how it works. Command objects have a notification property that represents a request.
Right.
So whenever a command gets executed, if you've got that property set, it issues a TDS packet that indicates a request notification has occurred and it needs to be appended to that request. So then SQL Server will register a subscription to that requested notification whenever it executes the command. Are you with me so far?
Sure.
All right. So once all that happens, SQL Server is going to watch for DML statements to be executed against the rows that are returned in the row set back to the client.
You want to define DML quickly?
Oh, data modification language statements. So, anything that modifies the data, an insert, update, or a delete, that would affect the row set that you've just flagged for this notification. So if something changes, a message is going to get sent to the service broker architecture. Now, that broker architecture itself can cause a notification to fire back to any registered clients for that particular row set. So you're going to be able to know if something changed.
Okay.
And this is much better than this horrible way that I've kind of kludged together to do this with, like how the
caching
dependencies work in ASP.NET 2.0 if you wanted to cache a data set.
Dude, I knew you were going to talk about this because I've done this recently, and talk about Rube Goldberg, man.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Rube Goldberg machine is a perfect analogy for this because now there may be different ways to do it. I tell you what I've done before, and this kind of sucks, and I probably will ruin my reputation to admit that I've written code like this.
You've actually already talked about it.
I
remember hearing about it earlier. Yeah, many shows ago, and I thought it was actually really clever. But go on ahead and bash yourself. Go ahead.
Right. So the way the dependency worked before, you could set a dependency to know if a file changed, right? So what I'd wound up doing before is inside a SQL trigger, causing it to go out and hit the file and make a change to it whenever an update, insert, or delete occurred. And then that would invalidate the cache, and I could have it reload a data set into the cache. So really I was doing it based off a trigger. So this is not using a trigger. This is using this server, broker architecture to pull it off.
So essentially what happens is the system has, I sort of liken it to the file watcher, right? The file system watcher.
This is like a database watcher.
Yeah, you might think that it's sitting in a loop looking at everything and with these big complicated, if-then statements in select cases. But it's really just a notification, just says, hey, when you do this, let me know. It's like a delegate, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really efficient.
Yeah, it is. It's very efficient, and there are probably some things that we would want to be careful about as far as using this. I mean, once I started to see how this worked, I started, kind of having these nightmares about, some developers setting up a notification on a table that was constantly being modified by other users. So just think about this for a minute. If we were to set up notifications on a bunch of tables that had a lot of heavy write activity into them, imagine what you're going to do to the network. You're going to flood the network with query notifications and refresh updates. So that's probably not a good case to set up for a query notification. I think probably the sweet spot is if you've got a table that has mostly read-only data in it that's only going to be modified here and there. But let's say if you were storing a list of part numbers or something from a lookup table that didn't get modified that much, but you wanted to invalidate the cache and reload it if somebody were to come in and modify a particular row. That would probably be a good case to do it.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Right. And, of course, if you've got a read-only table, it doesn't make any sense at all to set up a notification if it's not going to be modified.
Right.
Yeah, but that's not any reason not to do it.
Yeah, you're right, Roy. I mean, I'm certain somebody out there is going to do it regardless.
Yeah, just thought that was a little bit limiting, Some people might like to, just for
Well, before we talk about BizTalk, man, I want to hear this Christmas story.
Well, let me mention one more thing about ADO.NET, and I'll give you my Christmas story.
Okay.
So just, under the heading of maybe miscellaneous stuff that I've looked at lately that kind of impressed me, whenever you install, Whidbey or the community, preview or whatever you've got, take a minute and go out and look at the performance counters that get installed, for the SQL and Oracle clients.
Okay.
You'll be amazed. There are a ton of performance counters now that track things like, soft connections, disconnects, pooled connections, active connections, your free connections. We didn't have all that before. So they've really given us a lot of information to be able to track what's going on with our programs that are, connecting to databases out there.
It's pretty sweet.
So it's very sweet.
So carjacking, what is this story you're telling me about?
Okay, so this is my Christmas story. Usually something odd happens around Christmas. So I'm in a hurry to go pick up a picture frame of all things for somebody, and I'd just forgotten to get a present. So I went out to Target, here in Atlanta. Large parking lot. Drove my Honda white Odyssey van, and parked it and rushed in. And, what you got to know is whenever I'm home, I kind of grunge out. I look like, somebody people met in prison usually, most of the time. I've got, the shaved head and leather jacket and, ratty pants. So I go in, get my picture frame, come back out, and go up to what I think is my van. White van parked, roughly very close to where I'd already parked. Hit the remote to unlock the door, and I did notice the lights flash, but I open the door and hop in. So I turn over and look in the next seat, and there's this lady probably about 60 years old sitting there. And my first thought was, what are you doing in my van? And she turns around and goes, son, are you about to jack my van? And then
was she really that calm about it? Is that a Southern thing to be that calm when somebody's carjacking
you? Yeah,
you?
she was very, very calm about it. And
like she was going to offer you some sweet potato pie or something. Yeah, but go ahead.
So I'm... it's odd that I'm ever completely speechless, but this rendered me utterly speechless. I just had my mouth hung open. And she goes, well, I'd appreciate it if you're going to jack my van if you'd let me get out first. And I was like, well, I'm not going to jack your van. I'm sorry, I'm confused. And then she goes, well, there's help for people like you. Then I had to, explain to her that I also had a Honda Odyssey, and I was hoping it was parked somewhere nearby.
Mark the van jacker.
That is so awesome. Oh my God.
I doubt if she was listening, but that was the coolest lady, though. I mean, if I had been jacking a car, I probably would have left her alone just because she was sweet and calm about the whole thing.
I love that. There's help for people like you. That's great.
That's awesome.
Like she was going to offer you some cookies or something too,
Right.
That's wonderful.
Oh, I don't know.
You should have, got her address so you could mail her, a sorry card or something like that. I'm sorry.
Well, then she'd probably accuse you of being a stalker, and then she'd tell you there's help for people like you.
But I'm just glad I didn't go to jail. I mean, she could have jumped out and called the cops. I would have had a hard.
But wait a minute. Did your remote actually open her van?
No, it didn't.
Okay.
Her daughter was also in Target and had left their van unlocked, and she decided she wanted to stay in the warm van and not brave the cold, which cold down here is like 55 degrees usually.
So the van was running?
No, it wasn't running. She was sitting there in the dark with the door unlocked on the driver's side.
That's funny. All right, BizTalk 2004. Now, let me tell you what I know about BizTalk 2004. I know it's a complete rewrite done in C#.
Right.
And I know it's a lot different from the original BizTalk in terms of the way you think about, the sort of the technology. And obviously it does the same thing, but which is to simplify and orchestrate business processes. But why?
You know a lot.
Well, I know a little bit. I mean, I've seen some demos. I haven't played with it, of course, but I've seen, I've seen some in-depth demos, and I understand a little bit about it. So, why does a developer, care about BizTalk? And because doesn't BizTalk sort of automate a lot of code that a developer would normally do? Is this like, should a developer feel threatened by BizTalk?
Oh, no, I don't think they should feel threatened by it at all. The thing about BizTalk, and I probably wouldn't have talked about it on a .NET Rocks show before this version came out,
Okay.
I've wound up working with BizTalk since it was an alpha product, back, I guess, over 4 years ago now. It's been out for quite a while.
Yeah.
And the first version of it that came out, I mean, certainly from a programming standpoint, you could touch it if you wrote an adapter for it.
Right.
And there were interfaces available. You could write an adapter, and an adapter would be, in BizTalk terms, something that would allow me to write data out to something else. Would be a good way to think about it. I could have talked maybe from a programming standpoint about writing adapters, and certainly that's still valid. We can still write adapters today with BizTalk, but we really didn't touch it inside the environment. There were external tools that you use to manage everything about BizTalk, from defining schemas and maps to translate data to setting up messaging with it. So this new release integrates very tightly into the Visual Studio.NET environment, and that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it a little bit on .NET Rocks. Not only that, I'm just on a crusade to go out and evangelize BizTalk. I've been doing user group talks about it recently. SOA conference that's coming up here in Atlanta next week. I'm going to be speaking at that about how BizTalk and SOA kind of fit together. I'm a big fan of BizTalk, obviously. And I've rambled on so much now that I forgot your original question.
No, okay. So a .NET developer, what's going to be your average .NET developer's experience with BizTalk? I mean, we're not going to be like making diagrams and charts and stuff, are we? Or are we going to be implementing code?
You probably will be making diagrams and defining business process flows if you're a developer.
Okay.
The way the marketing was originally presented for early versions of BizTalk, they kind of said, "Hey, we've got this orchestration designer, and if you're a business analyst, you can sit down with the orchestration designer and define what the business flow is going to be." And then a developer will come back later and kind of tie this into, the BizTalk solution.
Right.
I've worked on 3 or 4 different BizTalk projects, and that just doesn't happen. You don't have BizTalk. You don't have analysts out there, business analysts, defining these workflows. The programmers will end up doing all of it.
I also thought that was a bit optimistic. That sort of approach.
Yeah, exactly. The reason I think developers would be interested in it today is, you've got tight integration with it, and I believe now it's finally poised to really take off. If you start looking at some competing technologies like web methods or BEA or TIBCO, if you look at the pricing, BizTalk is going to win every time. It's a better deal than any of these other solutions out there from non-Microsoft entities.
Mm-hmm.
I feel stupid, but I still don't actually understand what it is. I've heard a lot about it, but it was one of those products I never wound up using, and I hear all these words like orchestration and stuff like that, and I don't have anything in my developer vocabulary to really map that, so that I can make sense out of it.
You really have to explain it with a scenario, right?
Yeah, okay. Well, let's back up and talk about some fundamentals of it for just a little bit. So
BizTalk for the complete idiot, me right now. So yeah.
So usually when people think about BizTalk, they immediately think about business to business communication. So I've got some kind of partner relationship set up between a couple of businesses, and I want to be able to process something like a purchase order and get an invoice back, right? So BizTalk is a tool that would allow you to take a document that represents that purchase order and run it through a business process flow, transform, eventually the purchase order into some data that eventually comes back as an invoice.
So, Rory, what that means is all the little pieces of code that you'd have to write in a process, multiple applications at different points in different databases and different web servers, and all of that stuff can sort of be drawn out with a Visio tool. And then you can actually go and attach code to those little objects, and it writes itself, essentially.
Yeah, really, Rory, BizTalk is more about configuration than it is programming. And that's what I always try to tell programmers. This is going to be a tool that you install. You're going to spend your time setting up schemas and maps to translate data. defining, pipelines to input and output data, whether you want to encrypt it or encode it in some way or compress it. And, you're going to set up your messaging the way that's processed with this thing called an orchestration. So if I've got some kind of complex business flow that I've got to run data through multiple applications, I could do that through an orchestration if I wanted to.
Okay, so how much does this tool actually do for me, though? I mean, it almost sounds like in some cases all you're really doing is expressing intent, right? And then you're coming back later and you're adding some code to make something happen. I mean, where's the line? Like, where is it? I so don't understand it. I mean, what does it do for me? What does it not do for me?
All right, so the answer, trying to answer what it does for you, it will route and transform data for you.
Okay.
That data could be a file, a document, a message, something of that nature. Now, internally, BizTalk is generally going to convert that data to XML. So it's got it as XML once it's inside, the BizTalk process itself. That allows you to transform it using basically an XSLT that you don't have to write yourself. There's a tool called the mapper that would generate the XSLT for you to translate, one XML document format into another one if you wanted to. And the routing is probably a big thing to talk about. With BizTalk and through an orchestration, I can decide how I want to route that data from one component to another one.
And those components can be web services. They can actually be COM components. They can be .NET DLLs, right?
Absolutely. They can be web services. I could have adapters that stick something directly into Oracle or SQL Server. There are adapters that let me put, things into SAP, for example, the different CRM packages that are out there.
So is BizTalk actually looking at like type libraries and the WSDL and this and that and then generating method calls for you?
Yes. Basically, it takes care of generating that stuff for you. For instance, I could set up a BizTalk orchestration if I wanted to, and expose that as a web service. It would generate the WSDL for the web service. We haven't really talked about ports yet, but whenever I'm dealing with BizTalk in that sort of scenario, I wind up setting up web ports for it to process information in or out. And, the web ports would then be exposed as web methods through the web service.
Okay, so along those lines then, does the infrastructure already have to be in place, or can you define like a new web server somewhere and it will go out and configure like a web service on the server for you?
Well, no. You're going to have to buy BizTalk. You're going to need the SQL Server to set underneath it.
I mean more the application infrastructure, like all the different points where the data is going to pass through. Does that all have to be in place, or is it going to do some of that for you as well?
Those things would have to be in place, and in a lot of cases, you're either going to have to write an adapter or buy potentially an adapter to hook into another application of some sort. If you were doing something that was related to healthcare,
right?
You could get an accelerator package for HL7 HIPAA stuff,
right? And that would have all the formats of XML document XSLT stuff for those particular formats. Yeah,
for those documents. That's really what you're paying for. You're paying to not have to write and define all that stuff yourself. We were doing a user group talk recently here in Atlanta on BizTalk, and a question came up. A person said, what's the difference between an adapter and an accelerator? And one of the guys that was doing the talk with me, Mark Berry, who's just an absolute BizTalk guru, came up with a wonderful line. He said the difference is about $20,000.
Okay. Which is more expensive?
The accelerator packages are going to be more expensive. The accelerators are going to have all the document formats usually in place.
The other thing, I don't know, Roy, if it's obvious, but not only does it set up these infrastructures for you, but it actually executes them. So essentially you have an input point and an output point. And, for example, when you hit a web service and you send an XML document and boom, there it is. Now it's in the system. It sort of goes through your orchestration, your logic that you've set up, and all of the conditional statements and things that you've done with a flow chart, essentially, and out spits an invoice on the other end. So it basically lets you set up the orchestration, and then that code is not only generated, but you never even have to run it. It runs.
Right, and that saves you from having to write a bunch of custom programs that tie a bunch of different systems together in a company. I mean, whenever you do that, you're looking at probably a pretty big investment and time and money to get it done. And then, it's fragile. If something changes, you've got to go back and dig into this code. It's probably not going to be that well documented. BizTalk would solve these kinds of problems. Other things it does, too, it tracks the flow of data in a consistent manner that would really be hard to pull off otherwise if you're going across a bunch of disparate systems. The tracking allows you to know where things go. If there's an error with a document of some sort, you can know where things got off track. If you're in a business partner relationship with another company, and say you wanted to change business partners at some point, if you've written a custom application to deal with the flow of documents between the two companies, what do you do when you move to another company and they've got different document formats than your other partner did?
Mm-hmm. You change their formats.
Right.
Right. So if you've got BizTalk, you simply go out, you re-edit, the schemas for the different document formats. It would be a matter of tweaking configuration versus having to, start over from scratch and just rewrite a bunch of code. So potentially it could save you a lot of money if you're a large company. You've got a lot of app integration problems. You've got a bunch of different partners that you need to trade data with. BizTalk is definitely the tool to solve those kinds of problems.
It sounds like it'll not only save you money in development, but in maintenance as well.
Absolutely. Save you a huge amount of money in maintenance.
We have a message from the chat room from Matt Trevors from Pittsburgh. He says, can you ask Mark about the SharePoint adapter and if he has any tips or tricks for getting it to work?
I have heard... I don't want to say really bad things about the SharePoint adapter, but I've heard that there are problems getting it to work. We haven't tried to work with the SharePoint adapter in any of our consulting projects yet. But I kind of understand his pain. He's not the only person out there that's having problems with it.
Okay. All right, so keep your eyes peeled for updates, I suppose, is the answer there.
Right, and this is kind of a first run for them. Really, the idea behind kind of Jupyter was to pull all these different servers together. You're going to have SharePoint server, BizTalk, content management server, commerce server, all working in unison and getting along well together and talking to each other. It's going to take a while to get all that to work, to get the bugs out of it.
Yeah. What have you seen any? You've obviously done some big consulting projects with BizTalk.
Yeah, we've worked on quite a few. Some of them I worked on back when I worked with Extreme Logic, a company that got bought by HP a while back.
Right. And can you name any of those customers? Or tell us stories about their implementation at least.
Well, I can tell you I've worked on some stuff for Mary Kay Cosmetics, of all places, and also another one with SunTrust Bank. As far as implementation details of what they were doing, I'm not certain I can really talk about that without, context.
Sure, no, that's okay.
And making sure it would be okay for me to kind of air what they were doing internally.
But obviously it was a success.
Yes, very, very successful implementation for both of those companies.
Interesting.
Yeah, and actually we went out and spent 2 weeks doing training for Mary Kay to teach their developers to use BizTalk before the project actually kicked off. So that's one thing I would recommend for any company that is, going to have your own development team work on it. If you're not going to hire a consulting company to do it, invest in some training for them.
So who's BizTalk actually for? Because I never encountered it in the work that I was doing.
Well, generally you would think of BizTalk being a solution for a medium to larger size company. I'm not really sure that it's a great solution for a mom and pop shop. Although there's something called SEED, Smart and Easy Deployment, a kind of facet of BizTalk that would be good if you were a small shop and let's say you were doing business with someone like Walmart and they insisted that they wanted you to use BizTalk to talk to them. SEED allows them to to set up a configuration and an install for you as a small company running BizTalk to let you communicate with them without you having to be a BizTalk expert on your end.
Yeah.
So as far as the pricing goes, the pricing would probably take a lot of really small shops out of the running. When I say small, if $50,000 to $100,000 is an investment to get something up and running seems like a lot of money to you, then you'd wind up getting sticker shock pretty quickly with the BizTalk implementation.
But as you said, the alternatives are even more expensive.
Right. If you're a small shop, you're probably really going to write some custom code to do things like we're talking about.
Right.
And you're not going to have complex app integration problems like a larger company is going to have.
Right, and it's an issue of volume too, right? You're not going to have it on the same scale.
Right, absolutely. And whenever we talk about the new version of BizTalk, some of the warts that existed with the older one were the performance problems with orchestration. You've really got. I'm not going to hit you with statistics again or benchmarks, but it's something you really kind of have to experience with the new one. A lot of that's been fixed. Orchestration runs much more efficiently now than it did in the past.
And of course, it's all managed code now.
Yep, it's all managed code now. This is a complete rewrite. If we get back to why we were going to sort of talk about this for developers, if I could talk about some of the tools that are integrated into VisualStudio.net, that might help some people listening kind of get interested in it maybe. If you're inside VisualStudio.net, you've got a BizTalk editor that exists. You're going to get a different project type that gets plugged into VisualStudio.net. So if you start a BizTalk project, you can open up the editor to define XML schemas. So this is a really easy tool to use to define the fields that exist. Basically, think of it as almost like a record layout editor. So once you go in and set this up, it'll create a schema that can be used later to validate the document. And it could also be used to simply, say, read a document in. If you had a flat file, you could read that flat file in with what you define in the editor into an XML document. It would create the schema and validate that when it gets processed through BizTalk. The mapper itself also plugs into VisualStudio.net. This is one of the coolest things in the world. Even in the older version of BizTalk, I used to want to pull that mapper out just to use it to make XSLTs because it's super easy. If you've got two schemas, you're able to look at the schema on both sides, the input and the output, and literally just drag fields from one to the other as far as where you want data to be sent from one field in the incoming document to a field in the outgoing document. Now, this is where it gets really cool. There's something called functoids in BizTalk. Have you ever heard of a functoid before?
Yeah, I just got rid of one with some preparation H, as a matter of fact.
Oh, I'm glad I was able to set you up for that one. So functoids allow you to operate on that data. So you can do everything from string concatenation to database connectivity. There's a looping functoid built into it that allows you to do some pretty complex processing on that data when you map it from one format to another one. So aside from the BizTalk mapper itself, the orchestration designer now, instead of being like a Visio thing, it actually plugs into VisualStudio.net. You're able to use shapes to define a business process flow. That'll eventually get compiled into executable code that the orchestration runtime consumes and runs.
Wow.
The pipeline designer is also something new that plugs into BizTalk. Think about the pipeline designer as preparing sort of ingoing and outgoing messages for further processing. If you want to do something like encrypting or decrypting the data using a certificate, you can do that through a pipeline.
Kind of like a sync?
Yeah, if you wanted to, exactly. Like if you're thinking about syncs and remoting.
Right.
Yeah, just kind of like a sync and remoting. If you wanted to compress or uncompress data, reformat it, or use some sort of custom validation, you'd wind up using the pipeline designer to do that. There are other tools in BizTalk as well that are not integrated into VisualStudio.net. There's a business activity monitoring component of it, human workflow services, business activity services. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Health and activity tracking is another one. Those are external to VisualStudio.net, but they all play a role and setting up and processing something through BizTalk.
That's pretty cool, man. So the what was it I wanted to say? You know, I have seen people do this in BizTalk, where they click on, and maybe this is what Functoids help you with, but they like click on a shape or an object, and maybe there's some code associated with it, and this guy in this demo pulled up this little what looked like a dialog box with a multi-line text box in it, and typed in some C# code, and then closed it.
That was a Functoid, more than likely. There's a scripting Functoid, and that's like your catch-all Functoid. If you want to do something to map data from one place to another, that's exactly right. You can go in and write VB script or C# code.
Now, of course, you don't have the editor, there, but hopefully you're going to be just calling a DLL or something simple in there.
Right. Well, the main thing is as long as you're open to writing managed code, you can do just about anything you want.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's pretty cool just the fact that you can do that. Yeah.
BizTalk has the strangest vocabulary of any product I think I've ever heard of. Orchestration, Functoids. I mean, who was behind all this stuff? Functoid.
Pipeline.
I'm sure that you can get used to it, but I've been listening to you guys talk about it, and hearing you guys go back and forth and very seriously use the word Functoid is really interesting to listen to. Yeah, you drag a Functoid out and you Functoid your way up through the Functoid script, and it's so weird.
Well, hey, when you're out in Redmond, Rory, look up Scott Woodgate and have lunch with him someday if he's got time. I mean, he.
Will I understand him? I mean,
Oh yeah, he's like the a major evangelist for BizTalk. So
okay, so he knows who came up with Functoid then.
I'm certain he probably knows exactly the.
I guess the thing is, guys, that this is the people who are going to be interested in BizTalk are really the business people, not the developers. This isn't a tool that comes from the bottom up; it comes from the top down, right?
Well, you've got a point, but that's the thing I'm trying to change. I really want to get developers interested in BizTalk, and I've tried to think of good ways to do that. I would appeal from a consulting standpoint that, if you're out there looking for consulting work, there are not a bunch of BizTalk guys hanging around to fall out of trees out there to help companies right now. So if you want to try to find something that you can get into that's a niche, BizTalk is probably a good thing to do.
Yep.
It's not that hard to learn. I'll give you a link where you can download a trial version of it and just play around with it on your machine. A lot of the adapters out there that we've talked about, there are trial versions of those adapters as well. If you just want to play around with them to learn how they work, you can do it, and it's not going to cost you a lot of money. It's just going to be time. And if you're a BizTalk consultant, I think you can bill some pretty premium bucks out there.
That's what I've heard. Yeah,
specialization is a really good thing in consulting. So, what are the system requirements if I wanted to get BizTalk up and running on my machine? I mean, what do I need to have here?
It depends on what you want to do. I mean, if you're just going to play around with it from a developer standpoint of seeing what it does and how it works. Mm-hmm. You'd need to install SQL Server. The download and install of BizTalk is not that big. I'm thinking it takes about 250 megabytes on your hard drive. As far as RAM for you just to play around with it as one person, you probably need about half a gig of RAM on a machine.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't have to be huge. Now, if you're going to implement some kind of real world solution with it that's going to have a pretty big load on it. That's a different story. I mean, you see, 4-way boxes out there with, 4 gigs of RAM on them, handling BizTalk orchestrations running them. So, in a load situation, you may need some pretty serious hardware to get the performance level that you want.
Yeah, well, I'm on the sales and seminar team, so I don't think real world is going to be one of my one of my problems. So, but that's actually really cool. I thought I was going to need to have 12 servers all running in here and heating up my apartment. But if I only need to have one box and half a gig, how's it going to run inside of VPC? Is it going to do all right?
Yeah, it runs great inside of VPC, and in fact, that's what I usually do with it. I've got a notebook here with a gig of RAM on it, and I want to say it's a 2.4 gigahertz Pentium that I run VPCs of BizTalk with when I go out to teach it, and it works great.
Cool.
And in fact, I've seen a guy, I'm running it with less than a gig of RAM. But if you're going to run VPC, I'd want at least that much. And you just need that for VPC in general.
Are you guys watching the chat room? Some of these great lines, like, I was a chronic orchestrator until my doctor said if I didn't stop, I would have too many functoids. Right. I fixed the problem. I was in the discombobulator of the functoid jitter. I love my homies, man. These guys are great. All the guys that hang out and listen to the live show, man, they just thrill me.
That was Sergio P. and Lawrence, by the way. Those were the two people who had those comments.
Great stuff.
That's awesome.
I was laughing at you, Mark. I don't know why I said that, but like you would think I was laughing at you, but I was sitting there chuckling to myself and thinking, he might be thinking I'm laughing at him.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm used to people laughing. I enjoy bringing joy to others.
Well, yeah, you carjack people and they laugh.
Yeah, so I know. Yeah, made a friend while attempting to steal her van.
Oh my God! Hey, before we wrap it up, I want to say, Mark, have you seen the new website, the .NETRocks.com website?
No, I haven't. I haven't looked at .NETRocks.com. I didn't know that was out there. I usually go look at it through the Franklins.net.
Right. Well, we have a new business partner, Nucation. And Dax Pandy is the guy there. He's basically done a complete overhaul of all of our websites here, including .NET Rocks. And earlier, excuse me, in 2004, the guy who owned .NETRocks.com said, "Hey, I own it. You can have it." And I was pretty floored. So, but I wanted to wait until we got a new site. So Dax, we hired Dax to write it. And, I just had to do a little bit of tweaking. It worked with our existing engine that I wrote before in VBNet and SQL Server. So www.netrocks.com is up. And, of course, the existing website will forward to it. So, yeah, go ahead and check it out. And also, he did mondays.pwop.com, and also www.pwop.com.
Yeah, you showed me Mondays earlier. That was phenomenal.
Yeah,
I love the toilet paper you've got for the staff down there.
A couple of people wanted to know if it was like .NET Nuke or something. No, it's all 100% me and Dax, basically. I wrote the back end, the components in VBNet, SQL Server, store procedures, data sets, and Dax wrote the front end, and we just bolted them together, and there it is. So the guy's brilliant, and I would seriously recommend Nucation, NUKEATION.com, for anyone who wants to do some really, really good kick-ass website design. He's awesome.
Awesome. Hey, before we wrap up the show, let's talk about code camps a little bit.
Code camps!
I made a note here, and I almost forgot to bring it up.
Yeah, code camps.
So you've already been involved in some code camps up in the New England area, haven't you, Carl?
Well, I was involved in one that involved a lot of people. And then I was also poised to do one just by myself on VBNet. And we actually had 480 people sign up.
Holy cow.
And it's free. It's on the weekend. It was on a Sunday. But it just happened to be the exact moment that the biggest blizzard in Massachusetts history hit and dumped on the entire area, and the roads were frozen solid and nobody could get anywhere. So I got snowed out of it. So we rescheduled it for February 20th up in Boston. So yeah, I'm really, really excited about Code Camps. And it started in Boston with Tom Robbins.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, one reason I wanted to bring it up is we're going to be running one here in Atlanta now on May 14th.
Sweet.
So we're just in the early planning stages for it, but I'm just really pumped about it.
Awesome. And it's a free event, right? It's on the weekend.
Right. It's going to be a free event. The one that we do here is going to be at the Microsoft offices. They just moved from Dunwoody in Atlanta up to Alpharetta, so it'll be at the new posh Microsoft offices in Alpharetta.
Ooh.
And we're starting to line up speakers. If you're in the Atlanta area, or if you're a celebrity speaker of some sort that might want to come to the Atlanta area on May 14th, please drop me an email at markdunn@mindspring.com and let me know if you'd like to speak at this. One thing I'm really trying to do is encourage first-time speakers to get involved with it. If you are not sure if you'll be comfortable speaking in front of a crowd, what we're going to try to do is pair you up with another experienced speaker so you can co-present a topic with them.
You go through some rigorous training. You have to strip naked, go out in the middle of a busy intersection with a megaphone, and with a crowd of 30 or 40 people around you, and try to communicate. So that's the training program, right?
Right. There have been some other code camps going on recently too. There was one down in Florida. I don't know if that one's run yet or not. I believe it was in the Tampa market. There's going to be one coming up in Raleigh, North Carolina, and also Charlotte. And if you don't mind, I'll get dates and links to information about those so we can post it up on the show site.
Sure, we'll do that. Excellent.
But yeah, I think code camps are a really wonderful idea. I mean, the great thing is it's just a grassroots movement, to get developers excited about exchanging information with other developers.
Nobody does community like Microsoft. That's
absolutely
just the God's honest truth.
Well, not only community. I mean, just think about the wealth of resources. If you want to learn about any Microsoft technology, I'm always just in awe of everything on MSDN.
Yep. Yeah. It's just what can we say?
Yeah, and like I said, when I started looking into ADO.NET 2.0, just the numerous blogs out there of guys writing about it, it's just really incredible. The Internet's a wonderful and great thing.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
So what else is on your horizon, Mark? What are you going to be doing anytime soon?
Oh, well, there's something I am doing that I wanted to mention. I work a lot with Auburn University's Extension in Montgomery, doing training classes. Mm-hmm. So a while back they asked me to think about doing a gaming class for them.
Wow.
And I said, sure, I'll put together an outline. And I thought, there was a VB class that I taught to a group at one point. Somebody emailed me and said, hey, give me a training story if you're going to be on .NET Rocks. So here's my training story.
Cool.
So I had this class with some really talented developers that I don't know if they got signed up for the wrong one or what, but they were in like this Introduction to VB.NET class.
Huh.
So, the first hour, I was going over the basic, stuff, and they said, hey, that's not us. We want to do some cool things. And I said, well, what do you want to do? And they said, hey, why don't we try to write a game? So I thought, Tetris would be a good game to attempt to write in VB.NET.
Sure.
So we spent a week kind of going through writing the game Tetris in .NET. And we're able to pull off a pretty good version of it by the end of the week.
Cool.
So I thought back, if I wanted to teach Introduction to Game Programming, Tetris is like the Hello World program of gaming.
Sweet.
So I decided that's what I would do. And went ahead and published the schedule, and believe it or not, this thing was published to be taught out in March. It sold out in 2 weeks.
Wow.
So there was definitely a demand. There are people interested in learning about writing games in VB.NET, apparently.
I guess it's a good way to learn to program in VBNet. We have something that's a little more interesting than, getting data in and out of databases and into business objects, which tends to really be repetitive and mundane and boring.
Yeah, once you learn the right pattern to do something like that, you're pretty much done. After that, it's just repeating the same thing over and over again.
Right. Well, Mark, listen, it's been great having you back on the show. What can I say?
Hey, I've enjoyed doing it. I love the opportunity to come in and talk to you guys anytime.
I miss you, man.
Miss you guys,
now I got to deal with this guy.
Yeah, and stay away from my man, Mark.
All right, guys. We'll see you later. Thanks
again.
All right,
take care.
Life is hard. Pay my taxes with my credit card.
Awesome show.